The bright hospital lights made Dr. Maya Richardson squint as she walked through the sliding doors of Westbrook Memorial's emergency room. One hand clutched her medical ID, the other pressed against her swollen belly. The baby kicked as if sensing her worry. 28 weeks pregnant, and something wasn't right. Maya had felt the pain starting that morning, sharp, stabbing sensations that came in waves. As a neurosurgeon, she knew enough about medicine to recognize warning signs. This wasn't normal pregnancy discomfort. The emergency room was busy but not packed. A car accident had brought in several patients, nurses rushing between rooms with purpose. Maya approached the front desk, breathing deeply through another wave of pain. "I need to see a doctor," she said, her voice steady despite her discomfort. "I'm experiencing severe abdominal pain. I'm 28 weeks pregnant with possible signs of preeclampsia." Nurse Patricia Winters looked up from her computer screen, her eyes moving from Maya's face to her pregnant belly and back again. Something in her expression shifted, subtle but noticeable. "Fill this out completely," Patricia said, sliding a clipboard across the counter. "Take a seat, and we'll call you when it's your turn." Maya felt another sharp pain and gripped the edge of the counter. "I understand you have procedures, but my symptoms are concerning. My blood pressure was elevated this morning and unhaving." "Everyone here has concerning symptoms," Patricia cut in. "That's why they come to the emergency room. Please take a seat." Maya took the clipboard and found an uncomfortable plastic chair in the waiting area. She filled out the forms quickly, noting her medical history, risk factors, and current symptoms. When she returned the clipboard, she tried again. "I work at Central Hospital as a neurosurgeon. I'm not trying to jump the line, but these symptoms could indicate preeclampsia, which can be dangerous for both me and my baby." Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh, you're a doctor now? At Central?" Her tone was laced with disbelief. She took the clipboard without looking at it. "Everyone thinks they know what's wrong with them these days." "I actually am a physician," Maya said quietly, showing her medical ID. "Dr. Maya Richardson." Patricia barely glanced at the ID. "Well, Dr. Richardson, even doctors have to wait their turn. We'll call you when we're ready." Maya returned to her seat, texting her husband Anthony. He was in a meeting across town, but promised to come immediately. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. Maya approached the desk twice more, each time met with increasing irritation from Patricia. "My symptoms are getting worse," Maya explained during her third attempt. "I'm experiencing visual disturbances now, which can indicate rising blood pressure." "I'm sure Dr. Google told you all about that," Patricia muttered, just loud enough for Maya to hear. The older woman sitting next to Maya frowned. "You don't look well, honey. Should I say something to that nurse for you?" Maya shook her head. "It's fine. My husband will be here soon." Another 30 minutes crawled by. Maya watched as patients who arrived after her were called back. She observed Patricia chatting warmly with a young white woman who had come in with what sounded like a sprained ankle. Maya's phone buzzed. Anthony had arrived but was stuck in the parking garage. The text ended with, "Hang on, love. Almost there." Anthony wasn't just any husband rushing to be with his pregnant wife. What Nurse Patricia didn't know, what almost nobody at Westbrook Memorial knew, was that Anthony Richardson had quietly purchased the hospital 6 months ago through his investment company. As Maya's vision began to blur around the edges, she pressed her hand against her stomach again. The baby had stopped kicking. A cold wave of fear washed over her. Something was very wrong. She stood up, intending to approach the desk one final time, when the room suddenly tilted sideways. The last thing Maya heard before collapsing was the concerned shout of the older woman beside her and the sound of the emergency room doors sliding open as Anthony rushed in, just in time to see his wife crumple to the floor, ignored and unattended for nearly 2 hours in the hospital he owned. Anthony Richardson sprinted through the hospital doors just as Maya collapsed. His heart seemed to stop for a moment before adrenaline kicked in. People turned to stare as he called out his wife's name, rushing to where she lay on the cold hospital floor. "I need help here. My wife is pregnant," Anthony shouted, his deep voice carrying across the waiting room. 2 doctors who happened to be walking by immediately rushed over. Anthony cradled Maya's head while they checked her vitals. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, focusing on her husband's worried face before closing again. "What happened?" one of the doctors asked. "She's 28 weeks pregnant. She came in with severe abdominal pain almost 2 hours ago," Anthony explained, his voice tight with controlled panic. The doctors exchanged alarmed glances. 2 hours? Who was attending to her? Before Anthony could answer, Nurse Patricia hurried over from behind the desk, her face flushed. "She was waiting to be called back," she said defensively. "There are procedures." "She told you she was having symptoms of preeclampsia," said the older woman who had been sitting beside Maya. "I heard her myself. She showed you her medical ID. She's a doctor." The medical team quickly lifted Maya onto a gunny. As they rushed her through the double doors into the treatment area, Anthony followed, his tall frame and confident stride making it clear he wasn't going to be left behind. "Sir, you need to wait," Patricia began, reaching for his arm. Anthony turned, his eyes flashing with a quiet intensity that made her step back. "I'm not leaving my wife." Few people at Westbrook Memorial knew much about Anthony Richardson. He preferred it that way. 6 months ago, his investment company had quietly purchased the struggling hospital. Anthony had built his fortune developing healthcare technology that brought quality medical care to neighborhoods where hospitals had closed down. His passion came from personal experience. His own mother had died because the nearest hospital was too far away. "I need her medical information," a young doctor said as they moved Maya into a treatment room. Dr. Maya Richardson, 32 years old, neurosurgeon at Central Hospital. Anthony replied calmly despite his racing heart. "She's 28 weeks pregnant with our first child. She has a family history of preeclampsia." The doctor looked up, surprised. "Dr. Richardson, I've read her research papers. I had no idea she was a patient here today." "She wasn't treated as a patient," Anthony said quietly. "She was ignored." The medical team worked quickly, attaching monitors and starting an IV. Maya's blood pressure reading caused visible alarm among the staff. "We need to stabilize her immediately," the lead doctor announced. "Her pressure is dangerously high." Anthony stepped back just enough to let them work while staying close to Maya. He pulled out his phone and made a brief call. "Thomas, I need you at Westbrook Memorial now. There's been an incident with Maya." His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable weight. "And bring the hospital oversight file. All of it." Patricia hovered nervously in the doorway, watching the medical team attend to Maya. She'd seen Anthony make the call and sensed something significant was happening. Another nurse whispered something in her ear, and Patricia's expression changed to one of growing horror. Within 20 minutes, a distinguished man in an expensive suit arrived, carrying a leather portfolio. He nodded respectfully to Anthony before glancing at Patricia with barely concealed disapproval. "Mr. Richardson, I came as soon as I could," he said, his voice carrying through the busy emergency department. Patricia froze at the name. Richardson. The same last name as the patient she had dismissed. Her mind raced back to the memo old staff had received 6 months ago about new ownership, Richardson Healthcare Solutions. The hospital administrator, Dr. James Wilson, came rushing down the hallway, his face pale. He'd clearly been called as well. "Mr. Richardson, I just heard." "I'm so terribly sorry about Dr. Richardson. Is there anything?" "There's a great deal that needs to be addressed, James," Anthony said, his voice level but with steel underneath. "But right now, my only concern is my wife and our baby." Patricia backed away from the doorway, her hands trembling slightly. The whispers among staff were growing louder. The new owner's wife, a respected neurosurgeon, had been left waiting in pain while experiencing a potentially life-threatening pregnancy complication. And Patricia had been the one to ignore her. The treatment room buzzed with urgent activity as doctors and nurses worked to stabilize Maya. Monitors beeped, medical terms flew back and forth, and through it all, Anthony stood like a stone pillar, his eyes never leaving his wife's face. "Blood pressure 170/110, a nurse called out. "We need to start magnesium sulfate immediately," the lead doctor ordered, "and get obstetrics down here now." Maya's eyes fluttered open. Despite her condition, her training kicked in. "Preeclampsia," she whispered, her medical mind still working even as her body struggled. "Need to protect the baby." Anthony moved closer, taking her hand. You were right, love. They're treating you now. Dr. Wilson, the hospital administrator, stood awkwardly near the door, his face ashen. He'd worked at Westbrook Memorial for 20 years and had never faced a situation quite like this. The hospital's owner's wife, a respected doctor herself, had been neglected in his emergency room. Mr. Richardson, I cannot express how deeply he began. Anthony raised his hand slightly, stopping Wilson mid-sentence. Not now, James. The obstetrics specialist rushed in, quickly assessed the situation, and looked at the monitors with growing concern. We need to do an ultrasound immediately, she said. Let's make sure the baby is stable. As they prepared the ultrasound machine, Patricia appeared in the doorway again. She couldn't stay away, drawn by a mixture of concern and growing dread about her role in this crisis. Is there anything I can do to help? She asked, her voice smaller than usual. The lead doctor turned, his expression hardening. You've done enough. Dr. Lotes will be taking over as the attending nurse. Patricia stepped back as if slapped. Through the open door, she could see other staff members watching, whispering. The story was already spreading through the hospital. The room fell silent as the obstetrician moved the ultrasound wand over Maya's belly. Anthony held his breath, his hand tightening around his wife's. Finally, the doctor smiled. There's the heartbeat, strong and steady. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. Maya closed her eyes briefly, tears slipping down her cheeks. The baby's okay, she whispered, but we're not out of danger yet. The obstetrician nodded. You're right, Dr. Richardson. We need to monitor you closely. Your blood pressure is still dangerously high, and there are proteins in your urine, confirming preeclampsia. The next 24 hours will be critical. Outside in the hallway, Thomas, Anthony's chief legal advisor, was gathering information. He interviewed the older woman who had been sitting next to Maya, 2 other patients who had witnessed Maya's repeated attempts to get help, and several staff members. Patricia watched this from the nurse's station, her hands shaking as she tried to update patient records. Her colleague, Nurse Diane, leaned over. Is it true? Did you really make Dr. Richardson wait for 2 hours? I didn't know who she was, Patricia said defensively. There were other patients. That's not the point, Patricia, Diane cut in sharply. She told you she was experiencing symptoms of preeclampsia. That's always an emergency, owner's wife or not. Down the hall, Dr. Wilson had finally cornered Thomas. What's going to happen? He asked nervously. Thomas regarded him coolly. Mr. Richardson isn't focused on consequences right now. He's focused on his wife and their baby. But make no mistake, once they're stable, there will be a thorough investigation. In the treatment room, doctors prepared to move Maya to the high-risk maternity ward. As they adjusted her IV lines, she gripped Anthony's hand. This isn't just about me, she said, her voice weak but determined. This happens to black women every day. Women without husbands who own hospitals. Anthony nodded, his jaw tight. I know, and we're going to do something about it. As they wheeled Maya toward the elevator, hospital staff lined the hallway, their expressions a mixture of concern, respect, and shame. Patricia stood among them, finally facing the full reality of what her bias had nearly caused. The elevator doors closed with Anthony still holding Maya's hand, his face set with quiet determination. What had begun as a medical emergency was about to become something much bigger, a reckoning that would change Westbrook Memorial forever. Word traveled fast at Westbrook Memorial. By evening, everyone from the janitors to the chief of surgery knew what had happened in the emergency room. The hospital buzzed with nervous energy as staff wondered what would happen next. Patricia sat alone in the break room, her untouched coffee growing cold. The door opened and her friend Diane walked in. You should go home, Diane said gently. Your shift ended an hour ago. Patricia shook her head. I can't leave yet. I need to know if she's okay. Dr. Richardson has been stabilized, Diane said, sitting across from Patricia. The baby's heartbeat is strong. Patricia pressed her hands against her eyes. I messed up, Diane. I really messed up. Yes, you did. Diane didn't sugarcoat it. But the question is, what are you going to do now? Before Patricia could answer, the break room door opened again. Dr. Wilson stood there with Thomas, Anthony Richardson's legal advisor. Nurse Winters, we need to speak with you in my office, Dr. Wilson said, his voice unnaturally formal. Patricia swallowed hard and followed them down the hallway. Staff members turned to watch as she passed, their expressions ranging from sympathy to judgment. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor. In Dr. Wilson's office, Anthony Richardson stood looking out the window. He turned when they entered, his face composed but serious. Mr. Richardson wanted to be part of this conversation, Thomas explained as Patricia took a seat, her hands trembling slightly. Anthony studied her for a moment. Nurse Winters, I understand you've worked at Westbrook for 15 years. Yes, sir, Patricia said quietly. That's a long time. You must have seen a lot of changes in healthcare. Patricia nodded, unsure where this was going. I bought this hospital 6 months ago, Anthony continued, because I saw potential here. Not just in the building or equipment, but in the staff. He paused. Today, that potential wasn't realized. Patricia looked down at her hands. Mr. Richardson, I am truly sorry about what happened to your wife. If I had known. Anthony raised his hand. That's exactly the problem. You shouldn't have needed to know who my wife was to provide proper care. The office fell silent. Outside, the hospital continued its evening routine, unaware of the pivotal conversation happening behind the closed door. I've reviewed the intake notes, Thomas said, opening a folder. Dr. Richardson mentioned preeclampsia symptoms 3 separate times. She showed her medical ID, yet she was made to wait nearly 2 hours. Patricia couldn't deny it. Yes, that's correct. Can you help me understand why? Anthony asked, his voice calm but firm. Patricia started to give her usual answer about busy emergency rooms and triage procedures, but the words died in her throat. She took a deep breath. The truth is, I didn't take her concerns seriously, she admitted. I've been doing this job so long, I sometimes think I know better than patients about what's urgent. Even when that patient is a doctor herself. Thomas asked. Patricia hesitated. I thought she was exaggerating her credentials. Why would you assume that? Anthony pressed. The question hung in the air. Patricia had no good answer that wouldn't reveal uncomfortable truths about her own biases. Just then, Anthony's phone buzzed. He checked it quickly. My wife is asking for me. We'll continue this later. He headed for the door but turned back. Nurse Winters, I suggest you take some time to reflect on what happened today. After he left, Dr. Wilson sighed heavily. Patricia, I'm placing you on administrative leave pending a full review. Am I being fired? She asked, her voice small. That's not my decision to make anymore, Dr. Wilson replied. Down the hallway in the high-risk maternity ward, Anthony entered Maya's room. Her color had improved, and she was sitting up slightly in bed. The baby's still doing well, she told him, managing a tired smile. Blood pressure's coming down slowly. Anthony kissed her forehead. You scared me today. What's happening with the nurse? Maya asked. Administrative leave for now, he replied, sitting beside her. I just spoke with her. And? Anthony shook his head. She's sorry it happened to the owner's wife. I'm not sure she understands the bigger issue. Maya was quiet for a moment. You know, when I was waiting in that emergency room, I kept thinking about the statistics. Black women are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications. 3 times, Anthony. I know, he said softly. What if we use this? What if this became the moment Westbrook Memorial really changed? Maya's eyes were tired but determined. Not just a memo about treating patients equally, but real, systematic change. Anthony took her hand. Tell me what you're thinking. As night fell over the hospital, Maya and Anthony talked quietly in her room, sketching out ideas for transformation. Outside at the nurses' station, stories continued to spread about what had happened that day and about what might happen tomorrow when the owner's wife had recovered enough to tell her side of the story. 3 days had passed since Maya's collapse in the emergency room. Her condition had stabilized, though doctors insisted she remain in the hospital for continued monitoring. The private room was filled with flowers, most sent by hospital staff who'd never met her but had heard the story. Anthony walked in carrying a small potted plant rather than cut flowers. This one can go home with us when you're discharged, he said, setting it on the windowsill. Maya smiled weakly, always thinking ahead. A soft knock interrupted them. Dr. Wilson stood in the doorway with a folder in his hands. I have those reports you requested, Mr. Richardson. Anthony nodded for him to enter. How are you feeling, Dr. Richardson? Wilson asked. Better, Maya said. Though I'd feel even better if everyone would call me Maya instead of Dr. Richardson. It makes me feel like I'm at work. Wilson managed a tight smile and handed the folder to Anthony. This is everything we have on similar incidents reported in the past 3 years. Anthony opened the folder and began reading. His expression darkened. 12 formal complaints, he said quietly, all from patients of color, all dismissed due to insufficient evidence or differing medical opinions. Maya wasn't surprised. And those are just the people who filled out the paperwork. Most just leave and never come back. Wilson shifted uncomfortably. Our previous administration didn't prioritize these issues. I should have pushed harder. Yes, you should have, Anthony said, his voice firm but not unkind. But now we have a chance to fix it. Outside in the hallway, Patricia stood nervously. She'd spent the past 3 days at home, alternating between defending her actions to herself and facing the uncomfortable truth. Today, she'd decided to come in, not for work, but to do what needed to be done. A young nurse spotted her. Patricia, what are you doing here? I thought you were on leave. I am, Patricia said. I need to talk to Dr. Richardson. The nurse looked alarmed. I don't think that's a good idea. Please, Patricia said. I'll leave right after, I promise. After a moment's hesitation, the nurse nodded toward Maya's room. They're in there with Dr. Wilson. Wait until he leaves. Patricia stood against the wall, clutching her purse strap. Through the partially open door, she could hear them discussing changes to hospital policy. Maya's voice was surprisingly strong as she outlined ideas for addressing bias in patient care. We need anonymous reporting that goes directly to leadership, she was saying, and real consequences when patterns emerge. And training, Anthony added, not just one session, but ongoing education. Wilson nodded. I'll start putting together a task force. Make sure it includes people from the community, Maya insisted. This isn't just a hospital problem. It's about trust that's been broken over generations. Patricia felt a lump forming in her throat. She'd never thought about healthcare this way before. Wilson left the room, nodding briefly to Patricia without stopping. She took a deep breath and knocked softly on the doorframe. Maya looked up, surprise crossing her face. Anthony turned, his expression guarded. I'm sorry to interrupt, Patricia said. I can come back another time. No, it's okay, Maya said after a moment. Come in. Patricia stepped into the room, suddenly aware of how small she felt. I wanted to apologize to you in person, Dr. Richardson. What I did was wrong. Not just unprofessional, but wrong. The room was quiet except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. I've been a nurse for 15 years, Patricia continued. I thought I treated everyone the same, but when I really looked at myself these past few days, her voice cracked. I realized I don't. And a patient, you, almost paid the price for that. Maya studied her face. Why are you telling me this? Patricia hadn't expected the question, because I need you to know that I understand what I did. And if I wasn't the owner's wife, if I was just another black woman who nearly died in your emergency room, would you be here? The question hit Patricia like a physical blow. She opened her mouth, then closed it, unable to answer honestly. Anthony watched the exchange silently, his hand resting protectively near Maya's. I don't know, Patricia finally admitted. And that's the problem, isn't it? Maya nodded slowly. That's why the system needs to change, not just individual apologies. I understand if you want me fired, Patricia said. I would fire me. Maya exchanged a glance with Anthony before looking back at Patricia. Firing you doesn't solve the bigger problem. It just moves it somewhere else. What do you mean? We're planning changes at Westbrook, Anthony explained. Real changes in how patients are treated, especially those from marginalized communities. We need people who understand the problem from the inside, Maya added. People who have faced their own biases and want to be part of the solution. Patricia looked between them, confused. Are you saying you want me to stay? We're saying we want you to learn, Anthony clarified. And help others learn too. That is, if you're willing to do the work. For the first time since the incident, Patricia felt something other than fear or shame. It was a small flicker of purpose. "I am," she said, her voice steadier now. "I'll do whatever it takes." As Patricia left the room, she passed a young black woman being wheeled in for a prenatal checkup. Their eyes met briefly, and Patricia smiled warmly at her. It was a small gesture, but it was a beginning. Inside the room, Maya leaned back against her pillows, tired but satisfied. "Do you think she meant it?" Anthony squeezed her hand. "I don't know. But if we only work with perfect people, we'll be working alone." Maya smiled. "Look at you getting all philosophical on me." "I learned from the best," he replied, bending to kiss her forehead. "Now rest. We have a hospital to change." 2 weeks after the emergency room incident, the doctors decided they could no longer delay. Maya's blood pressure had spiked again overnight, and at just 30 weeks pregnant, they needed to perform an emergency C-section. The baby would be premature, but the risks of waiting had become too great. Anthony paced outside the operating room, his usual calm composure cracking. Thomas stood with him, having put aside legal matters to support his friend. "She's going to be fine," Thomas said. "Maya's strong, and she's got the best doctors in the state." Anthony nodded but couldn't find words. After what felt like hours, the surgeon emerged, still in his scrubs but with his mask pulled down. "Mr. Richardson," he said with a smile, "you have a daughter. She's tiny but fierce, just like her mother." Anthony felt his knees weaken with relief. "And Maya?" "Stable. We're monitoring her closely, but she did wonderfully. You can see them both soon." In the neonatal intensive care unit, Anthony stood over the incubator that held his daughter. So small she could almost fit in his hand, with tubes and monitors attached to her tiny body. Yet her chest rose and fell with determined breaths, her miniature fingers occasionally curling into a fist as if ready to fight. "We're thinking of naming her Rose," Maya said from her wheelchair beside him. Though weak from surgery, she had insisted on coming to see their baby, because she bloomed against all odds. Anthony knelt beside Maya's chair. "Rose Richardson. It's perfect." Outside the NICU, hospital staff had gathered with a banner reading, "Welcome Baby Rose." Dr. Wilson stood among them, alongside a mix of nurses, doctors, and support staff from every department. "They wanted to show support," Wilson explained when Anthony stepped out briefly. "Is that okay?" Anthony nodded, moved by the gesture. "More than okay. Thank you." As he walked back to check on Maya, Anthony passed Patricia, who stood slightly apart from the group. She'd been back at work for a week, though in a different department, as they'd all agreed would be best. "Congratulations," she said softly. "How are they doing?" "Fighting," Anthony replied. "Both of them." Patricia smiled. "That doesn't surprise me at all." Later that evening, when Maya was resting in her room and baby Rose was stable under the watchful eyes of the NICU nurses, Anthony called an impromptu meeting in the hospital conference room. Department heads, board members, and key staff filled the chairs. "First, I want to thank everyone for their support today," he began. "It means more than you know." Nods and smiles circled the room. "As you all know, my wife and I have been working on plans for Westbrook Memorial. What happened to Maya was terrible, but we've chosen to use it as a catalyst for change." He clicked a remote and a presentation appeared on the screen. The title read, "The Rose Initiative, Transforming Maternal Care." "We're redirecting $50 million from our foundation to completely redesign how maternal care works at this hospital, with a special focus on addressing racial disparities in healthcare outcomes." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. "Construction begins next month on a new maternal health wing," Anthony continued. "But buildings are just the beginning. We're overhauling protocols, implementing mandatory bias training, and creating a community oversight board." Dr. Wilson leaned forward. "This is extraordinary." "It's necessary," Anthony corrected, "and long overdue." The next morning, Patricia arrived for her shift to find a notice about the first training session for the Rose Initiative. She signed up immediately, despite it being on her day off. When she entered the training room that Saturday, she was surprised to find it packed with staff from every department. Even more surprising was who stood at the front of the room, Maya in a wheelchair, still recovering but determined to be there. "Thank you all for coming," Maya began. "Today isn't about blame or shame. It's about understanding and change. For the next 3 hours, they listened to stories, not just Maya's, but those of women from the community who had experienced similar treatment. Patricia found herself blinking back tears as a young mother described being told her pain was just anxiety when she was actually suffering from a life-threatening postpartum complication. During the break, Patricia approached one of the women who had shared her story. "Thank you for having the courage to tell us what happened to you," she said. I need you to know that I was part of the problem. I'm the nurse who ignored Dr. Richardson." The woman studied her face. "And now I'm listening," Patricia said. "Really listening, maybe for the first time." When the session ended, Maya found herself surrounded by staff members eager to share ideas and volunteer for the initiative. Patricia hung back until most had left. "Dr. Richardson, Maya," she corrected herself. "I just wanted to say that this was eye-opening. I never realized." Maya nodded. Most people don't until they hear the stories directly. "I'd like to help," Patricia said, "not just with the training, but with implementation. I've been a nurse here for 15 years. I know where the problems are because I was part of them." Maya considered her for a moment. "We're forming a patient advocacy team. People who will be assigned specifically to listen to concerns and ensure they're addressed. Would that interest you?" For the first time in weeks, Patricia felt a genuine sense of purpose. "Yes," she said. More than anything, 6 months passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. The summer heat gave way to autumn leaves, and baby Rose grew stronger each day. Despite her early arrival, she was thriving, a happy, healthy baby with her mother's bright eyes and her father's determined nature. On a crisp October morning, crowds gathered outside Westbrook Memorial Hospital. News vans lined the street, and a red ribbon stretched across the entrance to a brand-new building attached to the main hospital. A sign above the doors read, "The Rose Center for Maternal Health." Maya stood at the podium, no longer in a wheelchair, but standing tall in a deep blue dress. Rose was cradled against her chest in a colorful wrap, occasionally peeking out at the unfamiliar faces. "6 months ago, I came to this hospital as a patient and nearly lost my life due to bias and neglect," Maya began, her voice clear and strong. "Today, I stand before you not just as a survivor of that experience, but as the new medical director of the Rose Center." Applause broke out among the crowd. Anthony watched from the side, pride evident in his expression. "What happened to me happens to black women across this country every day," Maya continued. "The difference is, many of them don't survive to tell their stories. Many of their babies don't make it home." She paused, gently patting Rose's back. "This center isn't just about new equipment or a beautiful building. It's about changing how we see and treat every woman who walks through these doors. It's about believing women when they tell us something is wrong. It's about equal care, regardless of race, income, or status." In the front row, Patricia stood with a group of nurses wearing new badges that identified them as patient advocates. The past 6 months had transformed her almost as much as they had transformed the hospital. The initial shame had given way to purpose as she threw herself into the work of change. "I'd like to introduce someone who has been instrumental in developing our new patient advocacy program," Maya said, gesturing toward the front row. "Patricia Winters." Surprised murmurs rippled through the crowd as Patricia made her way to the stage. Everyone at Westbrook knew the story, how she had been the nurse who ignored Maya and how, instead of being fired, she had become a key part of the solution. Patricia approached the microphone nervously. "When Dr. Richardson first offered me the chance to be part of this initiative, I didn't understand why. I was the problem, not the solution." She looked out at the crowd, making eye contact with several of her colleagues. "But what I've learned is that real change doesn't come from removing people who make mistakes. It comes from helping them understand those mistakes and giving them the tools to do better." She turned to Maya. "I will spend the rest of my career working to ensure no woman experiences what you did. Thank you for seeing potential in me when all I could see was failure." The two women embraced, drawing emotional applause from the audience. Anthony stepped forward to cut the ribbon, with Rose reaching out from her wrap to help in her own baby way. Laughter and cheers erupted as the doors officially opened. Inside, the center was unlike any hospital wing most had ever seen. Warm colors replaced sterile whites. Comfortable furniture invited family members to stay. Birth suites looked more like home bedrooms than medical facilities. But beyond the physical changes were the new protocols posted prominently on every wall. Listen to every concern. Believe women's pain. Check bias at the door. Equal care is quality care. After the ceremony, as visitors toured the new facility, a young black woman hesitantly approached the information desk where Patricia was stationed. "I'm 8 weeks pregnant," she said softly. "My sister told me to come here because you actually listen." Patricia smiled warmly. "We certainly do. What's your name?" "Tiana," the woman replied. "Well, Tiana, congratulations on your pregnancy. Let's get you registered and paired with one of our midwives or doctors, whichever you prefer."